is timekeeping. We'll do a quick little thing on timekeeping and the government contracting requirements associated with that. All right, now that we're back in business. Okay, so the agenda today, we're going to talk about timekeeping issues. What are the requirements under the government contracting rules? Implementation issues a little bit, and training. All right, timekeeping is one of the more critical aspects of any business. If you've got employees, you have timekeeping issues. You know, your employees want to make sure that they're getting paid correctly, which is associated with time, and you want to make sure that they're doing the work. The other issues are compliance. There's extensive compliance requirements. It's not just DCAA or government contractors, it's the IRS, Department of Labor, even a lot of cities and states and counties have regulations. All right, now we talked about that. Nobody wants to feel cheated out of their pay. So, you know, everybody has payroll issues and labor issues. It's not, and then you got to deal with the DCAA on top of everything else. So a good timekeeping system will be accurate. It'll provide accuracy for both the employees and the employer and be able to show time worked. And if it works for you, we hopefully can make it work for the government also. This is also true of exempt salaried employees. One of the big problems we have with a lot of government contractors is the people on salary don't want to fill out timesheets. Well, government contracting is pretty much required. But the other factor of it is, too, is that you really want to know, employers want to know that they're working out there, they're exempt or not. Timekeeping practices, you have to follow them anyway, shows when people are there. Where's Mark today? Where's Martha today? Those kind of issues disappears. And then employees want to know how hard they are working. You know, they want you to know, hey, I'm only getting paid for quote unquote 40 hours a week, but I'm putting in 60 hours a week, and timekeeping can help with that also. Then we talk about the compliance issues, okay? Nothing's more regulated financially, accounting-wise, human resources-wise than labor. You know, laws and regulations exist on every level, federal, state, and like I said before, local levels. Certain cities have regulations. Well, you know, a good example of that is minimum law. You know, some cities have their own minimum law and safety rules that are not state or federal. Davis-Bacon is a completely complicated form of payroll. And another audience that you have for compliance besides the federal government and the laws and regulations, if you're involved in unions at all. On the IRS side, reporting and tax treatments are critical considerations. You know, you got to take the taxes out correctly, you got to tax things correctly, and you've got to report it all, 941s, 8809s, 940s, you know, all the different IRS requirements, and also state and local also. Okay, the diversity of the compliance issues outside of DCAA, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about what I've talked about now. It's you know, it's complicated. But I am going to remind everybody that contractors need to be aware of all these compliance issues and comply with them, even if DCAA is not. Now, there are some cases where DCAA will try and tell you something that actually conflicts with the IRS, state, or local laws, and you've got to have awareness of this to take control of it. An example of that is tax regulations prohibit LLC members from receiving a W-2. Everything has to go to them on a K-1 or earnings. But DCAA doesn't like that because then they don't know how the hours worked record, and they can't differentiate between profit and earnings. And of course, according to the LLC rules for the IRS, there are no profits, it's all earnings. And so that can get a little complicated. So that's a good example where you got to be aware on both of them to deal with it. If you're dealing with LLCs, there's actually an article on my website about LLC accounting. A lot of accountants, when LLCs became popular about 20 years ago, we all developed basically the same system for dealing with this issue. We've always gotten DCAA to sign off on it. Okay, now most of the material I'm going to use today is from it was issued last June, Information for Contractors. the DCA put out. If you go look for that on the DCA website, the last time I checked a couple of weeks ago, that link had disappeared when they put the new website up. You can get a link to it on the DCA website from our website. So if you go there, you'll be able to see it. So this is the section where they talk about timekeeping. And we can see that, timekeeping procedures and controls on labor charges are the utmost concern. Unlike other costs, labor is not supported by external documentation or physical evidence to provide an independent check or balance. That statement is not true. There are lots of ways that external documentation and physical evidence prove that work has been done. Cars don't build themselves. F-16s don't build themselves. Projects don't get done by themselves. There may not be specific evidence, but there is evidence. And this is another example of DCA going down a path that you may at some point in time be wanting to back them off on. Okay? The key is the individual employee. That's absolutely true. And you got to have internal control systems and management. You got to talk about individual responsibility. Now, and that's another area where DCA sometimes walks the talk and talks but doesn't walk. Independent responsibility means that employee is responsible for time charging in compliance with the rules and regulations, policies and procedures, laws, and everything else we're going to talk about. What you have to, what also has to be made important to them is to realize that when do they take responsibility for it? Do they take responsibility for it when they walk in first thing in the morning or when they're asleep at bed at 3 o'clock in the morning? I will argue that when they take responsibility for timekeeping is when they sign a timesheet. And until then, it's all speculation. It's not a certified document until an employee times it and somebody countersigns it. Now, that does not mean that you shouldn't have good policy procedures to regulate how they fill out timesheets. It just means that just needs to know the emphasis when a timesheet becomes a timesheet is when an employee certifies it. Okay, now let's talk about what DCA wants for the criteria for it. The first one they want, it's also important to realize, that they pretty much give general guidance. The only time they give specific guidance, and here's the CAM sections are up here, and once again I'll put this all up on the website. There's specific guidance on manual timekeeping practices in CAM 509.1, and there's ones about automatic timesheets in CAM 509.2. There's no specific guidance in the contract audit manual about electronic timesheets, which the vast majority of government contractors are employing across the nation. So we have to go with the general guidance that I'm going to talk about now. And let's also remember I'm using the word guidance, not regulation, not statute. There's very, very little about this in the regulations and the statute. And so the DCA guidance then has additional weight, but not absolute weight. It's not statutory. All right, so let's talk about it. They want a segregation. They want the person doing the timekeeping and payroll should be separated. Well, I'm not quite sure what that means, when they say timekeeping and payroll. I know what payroll accounting means, but timekeeping is usually into 2 or 3 different processes. One is the employee filling out the timesheet and submitting it. 2 is the supervisor accepting the timesheet and signing it or rejecting it and sending it back. And then 3rd, then it goes usually to payroll for administration. Unless, in the case of the payroll accountant, almost nobody, there's no way there isn't any segregation going in timekeeping unless you're a one-person operation. They want supervisors accountable for meeting contract budgets, should not have the opportunity to initiate employee time charges. Again, that's vague. This is a little general, a little vague. What does it mean, initiate employee time charges? To me, initiate employee time charges is saying, Mark, go over there and get this done. That could fit the category because then he's going to charge for it on a timesheet, and the supervisor has initiated it. So, what I think they mean, which they're not saying, because they like to keep it vague because then they can make it mean whatever they want it to say. What I think they mean is they don't want the supervisor filling out the timesheet. I could agree with that. Or putting a gun to the employee's head and saying, put this down on your timesheet. Now, they recognize the small companies are going to have issues with this. Okay. They want clear-cut procedures that are evident, reasonable, so they know what everybody is knowing what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, they want controls to be continually verified, and violations must be remedied through prompt and effective action. Okay, that's a little severe and it's a little commonsensical to me, but so we'll go on a little bit. All right, now they want employees to be continuously made aware of the importance of accurate timekeeping. This is done through employee training. This is done through posters that you want to put up. This is done through on daily thing. Mark, did you fill out your timesheet? Martha, did you fill out your timesheet? And also by DCAA's own audit actions. All right. Now let's go to their general guidance for preparing timesheets. They want detailed instructions for timesheet preparation, either through a timekeeping manual or company procedure. Those should indicate the employee, they should emphasize or indicate the employee is responsible for recording his or her time on a daily basis. That's important to DCAA. I know it's probably the one thing that none of us do, but you get a labor check, that's what they're going to check for. And when you think about it, they're right. They don't want you sitting there on Friday trying to remember which contract you were working on Monday, all right? They want it recorded on a timesheet, okay, whether electrical or paper. All right, they want the correct distribution of time by project numbers, contract number or name, or other identifiers, okay? They want, in other words, they want, you charge project 1, project 2, project 3, PTO, holiday, or overhead or indirect if you're going to a meeting or something, and it's not a direct charge. They want the different project numbers that people are allowed to charge. They want that available to everybody electronically or in paper copy for them to refer to. Another way, this doesn't talk about this, but a lot of ways this is getting implemented on electronic timesheets. And again, this is because this is general. They're covering both electric and manual in these general guidance. Is you restrict what projects they can charge to. If somebody cannot work on a project, that project number should not be available to them to charge. That's how a lot of electronic timekeeping programs are set up. Changes to the timesheet. I'll talk a little bit about this because of a mess I'm had to deal with the last year or so and with one of my clients. Procedures should be in place to identify the original time charge, the correct time charge, and documentation with the employee indicating his or her concurrence with the change, okay? Zero problem with that if it's a submitted timesheet on electronic timesheeting. On manual timesheet you go back to the CAM, and it'll tell you pretty specifically that the employee needs to scratch it. Timesheet A, the timesheet should be filled out in ink. B, that when they make a change, they should scratch that 3 out in ink, put a 4 next to it, and initial it, and the supervisor initial it, okay? That would fit this requirement. Electronically, the process is going to do that. Employee submits the timesheet, supervisor goes, I thought you were there this day. He goes, oh yeah, I forgot, even though you're supposed to be filling out daily. Supervisor rejects the timesheet, employee redoes the timesheet. There's a log record of the original timesheet and on all electronic timekeeping systems, whether the other keyboard features are turned off or not, and boom, both timesheets are recorded, and we comply with that way. Okay, here's another big one that DCAA opened a can of worms about a few years ago, and they re-put it into this new information. They're not backing, the DC people aren't backing off on it, but it becomes more and more has become complicated, although a lot of the payroll systems now are keeping track without any problem. And this is uncompensated overtime, going back to exempt employees. DCAA pretty much flatly states in here that if somebody works 50 hours a week and 30 hours of that is on one project, 10 hours is another project, and 10 hours of it is vacation or overtime or something like that, they want all 50 hours recorded, and they want this to be divided out. If they're making, if they're making $100 or let's say $1,000 a week, and they work 50 hours, they want their hourly pay adjusted to reflect whatever that is, $20 an hour. as opposed to the $25 would be or whatever, $22.50 would be whatever it was. I'm not going to do the math in my head. If it was 40 hours. Now we used to be able to deal with this by doing what was called time studies. Where we proved pretty much that there was no significant difference when they recorded the overtime. And the CAM used to allow for that. I haven't checked whether it does anymore, but this guidance here in the Information for Contractors pamphlet pretty much doesn't let that out. It pretty much flat out says labor rate contributions, labor overhead should reflect all hours worked. So, all right, so that is that issue. Okay, here we go back to the certifying. And again, this is where I would argue and have argued that a timesheet is created is when an employee signs it physically or electronically, it is certified then, okay? And so you need to certify, employees need to do that. All right, so let's talk about comments. First thing, this is talking about timesheet preparation for electronic and manual. It does not address automatic timekeeping, such as punch cards or badging systems. The major difference there is that if you've got a badging system, somebody's got specifically assigned work, usually specifically on a project, and so you know if they're on the work floor, they're working on that project, whether they are or not. They also, have other forms. They usually have forms or other ways, electronically otherwise, to ask for vacation or sick leave or holiday that are outside the badging system. So all of the guidance we've looked at so far is pretty much ignores the automatic timekeeping systems. On the other hand, those are fairly well covered in the CAM, the only problem being when DCAA tries to apply it to electronic timekeeping, automatic systems to electronic timekeeping, where these rules should apply. All right, let's see. Now we've got what DCAA expects for your policies, what they want you to do with this stuff. Let me pull up a little bit. They want the supervisor to approve and co-sign all timesheets. Well, there's a problem with that. Okay, a couple of problems with that. One is that what happens if you're the CEO and do not have a supervisor? Okay, that's pretty much an acknowledgement that DCAA has finally come around to saying, okay, we've got to deal with that. And secondly, it's not, if a supervisor is not available, should somebody else be able to countersign it? I think on a exceptional basis, that should be true. On a general basis, whoever's supervising the work should sign the timesheets. All right? Okay. Next, the supervisor is prohibited from talking about exceptions. All right, the supervisor is prohibited from completing an employee timesheet unless the employee is absent for a prolonged period. In other words, if you're gone on vacation, your employer can turn in your timesheet. Now, one of the problems with this is it assumes that all payroll activities are linked to timesheets. Now we just talked about that with automatic timekeeping systems, punch cards, and badges. PTO and authorized leave is not necessarily tied to that payroll at that time or to the pay card. And then another possible exception for that is bonus. And what if somebody just left and you got to pay out their vacation and whatever other benefits they have? Do you need to fill out a time card to do that, or do you just need to pay it out to them? And so that's, so there's a couple problems with that. And of course, then the attachment of the previous thing, of the supervisor timesheet to the employee's timesheet, maybe the electronic system will allow that or not. But like I said, almost all of them I worked with would keep both timesheets in there. So there is documentation, even though they actually use the word attach. All right? Okay, let's talk about, the guidance should determine the nature of the work that determines the proper distribution of time, not available funding, type of contracts, or other factors. Okay, well, yeah, all right. So, in other words, you shouldn't be charging based on your budgets, even though they want you to have a budget and that to guide what you're doing. They want you to charge what you actually did. And that should go without saying. In other words, the other way to summarize this Section 3 is all timesheets will honestly reflect the actual activity, whether it was working on Project A, taking vacation, taking a sick leave, etc. And you might ask about, some other issues in that, but there you go, is your general rule. Okay, number 4. Okay, The company policy state accurate and complete preparation done on employee responsibility. Careless may lead to disciplinary actions as well as applicable federal statutes. Okay. Again, this is an employee responsibility. Timekeeping is and timesheets are. Remind them, remind them, remind them. Okay. Now, again, look at that last sentence under federal statutes. DCAA wants to remind you, employees, that even if they're charging, if you're lying on your timesheet about a direct project, you may be cheating your employee, but DCAA takes the position that even though there's no direct relationship between the employee and the federal government, it is a federal crime. I don't know whether that's ever been prosecuted or not, but again, this is the position they're taking. And it wasn't just there. They have an entire section on that at the end of this thing. All right. Let's talk about implementation. You implement timekeeping practices, a couple different ways. First thing, you need some kind of recorder system. Whether it's electric timesheets, manual timesheets, or automatic timesheets. And the electric and the manual should meet the requirements that we've gone over in general. The automatic ones, I refer you back to CAM 509.2. Okay? All right. The other thing you're going to need is policies and procedures to address how this stuff is done. Okay? Those should be written out, should be clear and easy to follow, and I don't know how micromanaged they need to be, but that's, I'm sure DCAA would like it just so they could find more things to argue about. Finally, there needs to be training and assessment. Contract audit manual says there will be training on timesheets, and you should periodically assess the effectiveness of the system. It's amazing how many things pop up if you just go back and do your own checking after a while. All right, so let's talk about training. Training should occur as follows. Okay, first, new employee orientation. Timekeeping practice, everything should be part of when somebody comes on board so they figure out how it's all done. 2, there should be an annual refresher for all employees, reminding them of the importance of their responsibility to do timekeeping accurately, reminding what the policies and procedures are, and especially if there's been any issues, and if there hasn't been any issues, it can be really quick, all right? Change in environment. If the government has changed significantly requirements or what you're doing the work has, if something's changed, then you may want to go over and say, hey, this. Or if you've changed things, you've got new software in Office or anything like that, you're going to need to do training based on that. Assessment. Okay, assessment should be an ongoing part of management. You should basically do your own floor checks. Periodically, somebody from accounting or from management should go out to the floor and find out how people are filling out timesheets, whether they have any questions. And you'd be sort of amazed the kind of feedback you get when you do that. I'm not saying doing this every week or every month or maybe even every 6 months or once a year. You go out and do this. Just do this as part of your annual checkup, like maybe in April or something. And go do it. And you'll be surprised some of the questions you get back. You'd much rather have them asking you those questions than DCAA. Okay. All right. Training should also be on 3 levels. Every employee should receive the training we talked about. Then supervisors should receive separate training or talking to about, well, do I approve this or not? How they're responsible for double checking the time and making sure the time is right. Where the sign that. Now, this is where you get into state law. I had a DOL case once where somebody lied on their timesheet. They were supposed to be at a training that we had paid money for them to go to. They didn't go to the training. They lied on their timesheet. The supervisor signed the timesheet, came to me. I rejected it when I found out what was going on, and the Department of Labor held that because the supervisor had signed the timesheet, we had accepted it. And thus we had lost all of our rights to object to their timekeeping practices. Good thing to tell supervisors. Accounting and HR. You got to refresh yourselves occasionally on what needs to be done or if things change. You got to be ready to deal with these questions. You got to be able to deal with supervisors, and you got to remember what your requirements are as far as accountability and time management, time reporting to the government. Okay, all right, I got one question, which is, okay. if you're required to give people breaks, how are they supposed to record that time? That is something I've never had the courage to ask a DCAA auditor. And the way most places do is it's counted on the clock, which means if they got a 15-minute break every 4 hours, which I think is the law here in New Mexico, that if they were working on that project for the 45 minutes beforehand and the 1 hour after that, then they charge 2 hours to their timesheet. And like I said, that would, that gets micromanaging down to a level, what are they going to do, charge indirect for that 15 minutes? But nobody mentioned that one to DCAA, and maybe I'll cut that out of the presentation when I put it up. Okay, well, that concludes this now. I'm going to suspend the webinars at the moment. I'm going to get this one up, and the one about the CAM I'm going to redo and get up on the website. And then I'm going to look at a different way of approaching this stuff. So I will let everybody who's been attending know. It'll probably be next week after the seminar is done, which I started getting registrations again today for. Thank goodness for the government being back in business. Please visit our website. This will be up there probably tomorrow. And you all have a great day.